with just these two candidates. So, well, why don't we get started? I have a very brief bio of both candidates. I'm sure both are going to fill that out in their opening statement. I was going to say that we had three lawyers on because I think Chief Williams was. So maybe I'll start with a lawyer joke. I'm a lawyer too, so I can tell them. But when I was leaving science publishing to go back to go to law school, the editor of one of my journals controlled clinical trials. They ran clinical trials. They did the underlying math that told you when to stop the trial when one drug was more successful than the other. And the editor told me that they were now using lawyers instead of rats in the clinical trials because there are more of them, and you don't grow so attached to them, which I think is the best lawyer joke I've ever heard. It's very nasty, and in fact, lawyers, people say that in Shakespeare, one of the history plays, the anarchist says, "First, we'll kill all the lawyers," and some people took that as an expression of the hatred that people feel for lawyers, when in reality, what Shakespeare meant was if you wanted to stabilize a country, if you want to destroy a country, if you want to create anarchy, the first thing you do is kill all the lawyers. So, lawyers are very necessary to a civilization. So we have, in alphabetical order, Rick King, who is a former lieutenant at the West Palm Beach Police Department, was there for 20 years. Subsequently, he was the attorney for the Palm Beach County PBA and now represents his own law firm. Sienna Asta is a lawyer, practices in Palm Beach County, graduated from Thomas Cooley Law School with a concentration of litigation, and has a bachelor's degree in biomedical sciences from the University of South Florida. She began as a criminal defense attorney and is transitioning into civil litigation and personal injury. And Mr. King, I didn't give your schools where you got your degrees. You may want to do that in your introduction, but why don't we start with opening statements, and Shar, if you want to start the timer in a second. Again, there's 3 minutes for the opening statement. We'll alternate who goes first on the questions so that it's more even. So you are up, Rick.
I'm up. Okay, good. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rick King. I am a candidate for the State House District 88, and as Michael told you, I did go to. Well, he didn't tell you. I started college at Slippery Rock University in Western Pennsylvania, and I graduated from Palm Beach Atlantic University here in West Palm Beach. I was a police officer in the city for 20 years. I was a first responder there, and then I was promoted to sergeant and then ultimately lieutenant before I came down with a degenerative eye disease that caused me to leave police work. They kind of frowned upon you carrying a gun if you don't see very well. So I left there and went to a Nova Law School in Fort Lauderdale, where I graduated there, and then ultimately was hired by the police union, where I represented the rights of law enforcement officers. and before leaving there and starting my own firm. I'm an unlikely candidate for the office because I never really wanted to run for any elected official office. I ended up speaking with a friend of mine who talked to me about the service that I had done and the unique position that I'm in now. You see, sometimes you don't plan to do something, it just kind of happens to you. Serving 20 years as a police officer and committing my life to that at the time was a blessing for me, and it taught me to connect with the community and meet with the community and make friendships and long-lasting relationships and understandings of what the community actually needed. As a police officer, once that time was over for me and I became a lawyer, and specifically in the last probably, I don't know, 6 or 8 years, there has been a disconnect between the community and law enforcement. And this friend contacted me and he said to me, "You are uniquely qualified to stand in the gap and to bring everybody to the table. Because right now with this discord and this unhealed relationship that we have in our community with law enforcement, there has to be somebody with the ability to bring everyone to the table and give everyone an opportunity to talk about changes and real changes that can make our community tighter and a more cohesive unit. That relationship has to be repaired." So I got into the race because I thought that I could, as a Black man, that I could stand in the gap and bring everyone to the table, the police union, the community, the police, and sit down and come up with changes that everybody can buy into. Because if we don't all buy into those changes aren't going to take place. But a funny thing happened when you start doing this, you start meeting people, and what you quickly learn is that people don't really care about what you say you're going to do. They care about whether or not you have a good heart and whether you're going to take their issues to Tallahassee. And so during this campaign, I've met people who have talked about their problems.
What? Fine.
Did she say time?
Yeah,
Okay.
I gave you 10 seconds. I hope you heard me.
I didn't, sorry.
Okay.
All right, Nick.
Maybe on the next one, give a 30-second warning.
30, I was giving 10 seconds. You want me to give longer?
Yeah, 30 seconds probably. Okay. Sienna, Ms. Osta.
All right, yes. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sienna Osta, and I am running for State House representing District 88. And this is actually my second time running. Some of you might remember me from last election. And last year I ran in the midst of the Black Lives Matter movement. I was very moved by what was going on in the world and in our community. And I, as a local attorney here, I really wanted to make a difference and to make an impact through government, because the system is broken. And if we can repair it from legislation, that's how I want to fix it. So it's important to note, I guess as an intro here, I'm a Lebanese American, very proud of that heritage. And some of the things that I'm running on are to protect women's rights. Florida's broken unemployment system needs to be repaired. And in light of the Gabby Petito case, I have what I like to call Gabby's Law. It is my proposed legislation to enable law enforcement to find all missing persons.
Okay. So we'll move on to the first question. You both will have 3 minutes. And why don't we continue with you, Sienna, since Mr. King started. And what you were just saying basically leads into the question, which is, what are the top 3 things you would look to get accomplished if you were elected?
Okay, perfect. I really love this question because I think it highlights the most important reason for why we're doing what we're doing. Why are we running for office? I would say the top three reasons why I'm running, like I mentioned briefly in my introduction there, to protect women's rights, to push my legislation that I'm calling Gabby's Law, and to repair Florida's broken unemployment system. I'm also running, though, to offer people shameless, unapologetic transparency. And I believe firmly that what people are looking for these days is someone who will be incredibly transparent and not just make empty promises and not fulfill them. Many of our current elected officials, I think they've lost sight of why they took the job in the first place, to represent the people, not themselves, not their egos. And so I'd like to be the one who creates this movement with a ripple effect of offering that kind of, like I said, shameless, unapologetic transparency. And then I'd also like to touch on Gabby's Law. If I have a little bit of time, I forgot to check the clock, but if I've got a few seconds here, Gabby's Law is what I'm proposing. Many of you are familiar with Amber Alerts. You get a notification on your phone. Those are for children, ages up to 18 or 21, depending on the state, with age of majority there. But Gabby's Law would be connected to what I call Gabby Alerts, and it would create a tool for law enforcement so that within the first 24 to 48 hours, critical time when somebody goes missing, there will be alerts sent to everybody in that area or region. And it will help find all missing persons, not just the pretty white girls that go missing, but everybody, because there is a disparity. I did the math, I did the research on it. For every one person that looks like Gabby Petito, there are about 5 minorities that are missing persons as well that do not get the same media coverage. They don't get the same level of attention to their missing person cases. And that's a problem that needs to be fixed. And it can be
30 seconds.
fixed with Gabby's Law. So I would say those are the 3 reasons why.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rick?
Yes, thank you. So as I started to say when I was giving my introduction, the main reason, the reason that I thought I was getting into the race was about criminal justice reform. And I'm still very serious about that. And I think that anybody who's watches television or who has been paying attention for the last year, we all know that there has to be some changes in what we're doing with our law enforcement officers. But at the end of the day, it can't be talk of defunding. It can't be talk of anything that's not going to bring police officers to the table. We have to bring them to the table, and we have to give them reasonable and also attainable changes that they can make. And there's some things that are readily apparent. I don't have enough time to go into them, but one of them is just creating an atmosphere, because it happened to me when I was a young cop. And sorry if I'm speaking fast, but when I was a young cop, they offered me an opportunity to buy a home within the city limits, with $500 down and no PMI insurance and no closing costs. And what that does is to bring officers into your community, and they become invested in your community, and they become a part of the community, and then you can actually negotiate real change. So, but as I started this and I started talking to people in the community, I started doing what's called a listening tour, and going out and talking to the people to see what changes they wanted to make. And what I'm finding out when I talk to, for example, I talked to a gentleman in the what we call the West Side here in West Palm Beach, and he talked to me about elected officials going to Tallahassee, and he's an ex-football player, and he talked about it in terms of the playbook. He said they go to Tallahassee and they get the playbook about how to make changes and how to do development within the community, and they go and they tell it to the people at City Hall, but they don't bring it out to the people in the street. And so one of the things that I'm concerned about is legislation that I'd like to get involved in is development within our Black communities and Black and brown communities, and trying to redevelop them and talk about the money that we use from CRA money, rather than bringing in new development, helping people restore the houses that are already there to create generational wealth. So I think that's important, and it's the only way that we're going to build up our community from the inside out. And that's how we have to do. We have to start investing in the people that are here before we can bring in people that aren't here. And the third thing is many of you who I've talked to throughout this have known that, and I think I just told Mr. Caswell that my mom lives in Pittsburgh, but I'm having her relocate to live here with me in South Florida. And so I have a real concern about seniors and how they are affording life and how they are getting along on some of them on Social Security fixed incomes. I spoke to a woman the other night at HISPAC, and Annette, she told me that she makes $17,000 a year, so it puts her in a place where she's ineligible for like SNAP funds, but she can't make it. If her car breaks down, she just loses her car. And so there has to be some programs, and I want to introduce those people to programs that bring programs back that help our seniors be able, to survive. Was that time?
Yeah.
Okay.
And David, would you mute everyone, or can I do that here?
You can, but I just muted the one that the sound was coming from.
Okay, all right. Okay, so. All right, so now you'll have to unmute yourself. Rick, you're going to go first on the second question. And of course, you'll see there's some overlap between these. I think both of you have touched on the issue we raised in the second question, which is how would you make the party more responsive to the needs and concerns of communities of color?
Glad you asked that question, because that was the exact question that was posed the other night. And so the answer to that is, and actually it was a conversation that I was having with a friend just minutes ago, is that as Democrats, what we've done is we've kind of all moved to our respective corners and isolated things, issues that are germane to just that particular core group. But what we really have to do is we have to stretch that blanket out, and we have to include everyone and start going for the greater good. When we start individualizing our own individual problems and don't reach out for the greater good, then some people are going to get left out. So how do we make advances in the African-American community? We include them in the overall blanket of what we're doing, and you make sure that they have a voice at the table, which is exactly what my campaign seeks to do. What I want to do, I want to bring everyone to the table, give them a voice, and talk about everybody's concerns so that we have equal representation in Tallahassee. As a freshman up there and in the minority party, there's not a whole lot that can be done. But if at the same time, though, we still need to bring those voices and we need to speak them loudly. And when we can, we have to be strong enough to stand our ground and make sure that we're fighting for those voices. And then when we can, and we're strong enough, we got to be strong enough to reach over the aisle and try to find some consensus so we can make some advances in not just the African-American community, but in every community.
Thank you. Yeah, you've already touched on the next question, but you'll see that in a minute. Sienna, shall I repeat it, or?
Yep, that would be fine if you could repeat it.
Okay. How would you make the party more responsive to the needs and concerns of communities of color?
Okay, I think the best response here is unity. We're very divided, not just here locally, but also even the political parties. You've got the Democrats and the Republicans, and it's a very divisive situation that we find ourselves in. And I, in part, blame some of the current and past elected officials for creating that great divide. One of my biggest goals is going to be working on bringing everyone back to center and bringing that unity to get rid of the divisiveness and the hatred that has come with it, because that's very toxic. But to answer your question, unity, okay? I'd also like to have programs that promote small businesses, especially businesses that are owned by our neighbors that are Black and brown, and have programs in place for that. And the third thing is, like I mentioned before, my proposed new legislation that I'm working on that I'm calling Gabby's Law. I touched on it briefly in the other question or response, but I'd like to go a bit more into detail. I went to the FBI website and the NCIC National Center for Information, or National Crime Information Center. I did the math, lots of numbers there on it. And because I'm a very skeptical person, and I found that there is in fact a disparity between the number of missing persons who are white versus missing persons who are of minorities, which the FBI classifies as Asian, Black, Indian, or unknown. And as I touched on earlier, for every one person that looks like Gabby Petito, a blonde white girl, there are about 5 other missing persons that are minorities that do not get the same level of media coverage or attention to their cases. And Gabby's Law would have Gabby alerts, which, as I mentioned earlier, would act as similar to Amber Alerts on your phone. Okay, so you would get notifications that someone in your area, someone in your region is missing within that critical 24 to 48 hour time period. And it would act as a tool for law enforcement and others to more collectively work as a team to find these people. And it would ensure that not just the pretty white girls get put on TV, but everybody. And thank you. And then it would also have a social media component to it. I don't want to go into all those details in 30 seconds because I don't have enough time, but Gabby's Law with hashtag find all missing persons would ensure that there is equal coverage, equal representation to all of our friends, family members, and neighbors who have gone missing.
Thank you. So you'll start on the next question,
Okay.
which is, and it's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. How do you believe you can be effective in an environment dominated by Republicans?
Well, surprisingly, Republicans like me. I don't know why, but people usually think I am Republican. I'm not. I've been a registered Democrat since age 18. My entire family is Republican. I'm the only Democrat. And that is how important women's rights are and were to me when I registered as a voter at age 18. From the time I was 18, I also worked at pretty much every election that I could get my hands on as a machine clerk on election day. So I volunteered for that. But as far as handling the Republicans, besides being just the charming, persuasive person that I am, I'm also an attorney. I've been practicing law for about 5 or 6 years now. I'm a very good litigator. I'm a trial attorney. And as advantageous as it is to be aggressive and advocate in that way, there's also an advantage to having sort of a softness with the negotiation power. And you cannot dig your heels in the ground and be stubborn, because then nobody wins, the people suffer. So you have to have a combination of strength with fluidity and flexibility in order to get the other side, get the Republicans to listen, first of all, to our overall message. And once again, it circles back to what I said before of unity. We got to bring the parties back together, get rid of that divisiveness. And it is going to take somebody like me, a very strong negotiator, to work on bringing the aisles together.
Thank you. Rick?
So let me say this. I was a police officer for 20 years. During that time, I served on the police union. When I left police work, I was hired by the police union, and I was a in-house counsel for the Palm Beach County PBA. During that time with the police union while they are a labor union, they are a very different type of animal in that they routinely worked on both sides of the aisle. So I learned that at a very young age, and I learned that how to work on both sides of the aisle and how to communicate. I learned that there are times when you have to be strong and hold your position on your side of the aisle. And I also learned that, there are times when you can still be firm and reach across the aisle to find some consensus. As a negotiator for the police union, one of the things that I did was negotiate contracts, and I am a litigator myself. I am a criminal defense lawyer, and so I'm persuasive in my conversation. I know how to communicate with both those who hold my position and those who don't. One of the things that I pride myself on is the amount of time that I've spent in those negotiations, and having led contract negotiation teams in changing the minds and persuading the other side of the table to agree with our position. Now, I'm under no illusion that I'm going to go to Tallahassee and make those Republicans think that to jump on board, and all of a sudden that we're going to be like HB1 is gone and everybody can vote. That's not going to happen. But there will be times when I'll be able to reach across and find some consensus in one space. And if you can negotiate consensus in one space, you can drag it to the next space. I've been a leader of platoons of police officers, and it's difficult to get consensus just on your own side sometimes. The ability is to make someone do something that they want to do because they want to do it for you. And that's the thing that I excel at. I'm able to communicate with people, make them see the bigger picture, and bring them to the position where I need them to be because they want to be there, not because I'm dragging them.
Thank you. But this is the last question, but we will be, if people want to put questions in chat or raise their hands afterwards, after the last question and after the closing statements, you could start submitting your questions, and if we have time, we'll ask them, or you'll ask them. So, Rick, this is the last question from us. And Omari was one of only 7 people in the Florida House to vote against. Well, actually, there was one, I think, in the Senate to vote against the amended farm bill aimed at stopping lawsuits or any complaints with the burning of sugar. Big Sugar donated, I think, $12 million to candidates in the last election, and Democrats as well as Republicans voted with them. If elected, what do you plan to do with respect to what is clearly the environmental racism that is part of the burning of sugarcane?
So let me say this. First of all, I agree that there has to be some changes in how sugar does business. And all the other major sugarcane manufacturers in the world are all changing to a green burn. Big Sugar here is the last one to make that change. And they have to do it, and they're going to do it probably kicking and screaming eventually. To answer your question, where I stand on it, I stand that they need to change. That's obvious. I've been an advocate for the downtrodden and the accused for all of my life, and so I'm also an advocate for the people out there in the Glades. But let me tell you this though, because there's another side to this coin, in that sugar is the largest employer of the minorities who live out there in the Glades, and so when that coin changes, there's the possibility that you have a lot of affected people who are out there who are going to lose their jobs. And so I think we have to do this with a more to come of mindfulness of what could happen by forcing their hands on something. And so I think there's a way we need to bring sugar to the table, and maybe we do it incrementally. Maybe we work out a way where the changes occur, and we are mindful of the people that are out there. So while I agree that changes need to be made and they need to go to a green burn, I'm also mindful of the way that we do it so that we don't impact the workers that are out there who depend on those jobs day in and day out.
Thank you. Sienna?
Yes. I am very excited about this question. This is my favorite one so far of the evening. Let me start off by saying I remember seeing that vote when it came through, and I was very proud and very pleased that Omari was one of the few who had the guts to vote against the Big Sugar with that bill. Again, like I said earlier, I am running to offer what I like to call shameless, unapologetic transparency. And in my campaign, I'm not accepting money from any kind of big companies or corporations, which, let me tell you, makes fundraising a lot harder and a lot slower. But the reason I'm so stubborn and steadfast on that is because I refuse to have companies stick their hands into my pockets. I want money and donations only from the people, only from supporters, because at the end of the day, I want to owe nothing to no one but the people. It's probably not the best grammatically way to say that, but it's imperative to me. That's part of the movement that I am trying to start. That's part of the ripple effect that I am trying to create with me running in this election, is to have more people step up and run for office within their community, within their state, to make a shift, a changing of the guards, if you will. We have too many elected officials that are currently in office that have become corrupted and that have really lost sight of the interests of the people, and they're focused on themselves, they're focused on their ego, and that's a major, major problem. So hopefully by running, just the simple fact that I'm running for this office, it can inspire others who want to promote change and want to do good for the community and good for the country. It'll, encourage them to also run. But as far as with Big Sugar, I would be on the same page with Omari. I'd be voting against it. We need to have our people's interests first, always, ahead of our own. And when I say our own, I mean as my own interests. The people have to come first with that, not the companies.
Great, thank you. Before we go, let me ask both of you if it would make more sense to have some questions from the people attending, and then you'll do your closing statements.
Yes.
So I see there are two hands raised. David, I can't see who they are though.
Okay, Corinne Miller is first. When you raise your hand, don't do this. Go
Right.
down to the bottom. It's usually under the reactions button, and there's something that says raise your hand. And that brings up that little yellow hand that you see in the upper corner of some of these people. And Corinne, you're up.
Okay. As a longtime worker within the party, I would like to know what the history of involvement with the party of the candidates have. Have they ever worked for another Democratic candidate? Have they contributed to a Democratic candidate? Have they contacted the party chair to advise them that they're running and get to know them? Remember, your election is dependent upon the precinct workers and zone leaders within the area that you cover. And you can't do it alone. You need the rest of us. So we'd like to know, what have you done in the past to help others? And have you had any conversations with the currently sitting legislators from at least Palm Beach County?
I'll go first if you want.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So yes, I have spoken with many of the legislators here in Palm Beach County. I have spoken with Terry Rizzo. I have worked on other campaigns. I was a member. Well, personally, I worked on. Well, let me say this: as a member of the Palm Beach County PBA, I worked on many campaigns. Most recently, I think I've worked on Doug Lawson's in Riviera Beach. I've worked on anybody who ran in West Palm or Riviera Beach. I've worked on their campaigns. I've donated money to many, personal money to many people running for office. So I've done all of those things.
Sienna.
I'm sorry, one more thing. I was a member of the Palm Beach County, or the West Palm Beach Democratic Club here, the downtown club, and I often paid for the space for them to hold their meetings.
Good guy.
Sienna.
My turn. Okay. So yes, as far as I'll break it down like this. I'm going to start with my involvement with the Democratic Party. As I stated earlier, I registered as a Democrat when I turned 18 years old. I learned the hard way that was not the best way to spend your 18th birthday at the DMV. Took up half my birthday, but at least I got registered, and I've been a Democrat, let's just say, since day number one. As far as Other party involvement, I've been involved in elections, specifically as a machine clerk on election days. And as far as the other part of your question, involvement with the community to help others. Okay, I love this part. I have always been a huge advocate for giving time to others in the community. As early as high school, I set the record for the most hours volunteered because I was in the IB program, International Baccalaureate program, and we had a requirement for a certain number of volunteer hours in various areas. I set the record for 1,500 hours. And I think I still have a plaque on the wall in my high school. But besides that, after high school, there's more life, right? I've been a guardian ad litem for a number of years. I think it's very important to be a voice for the children. And when I say guardian ad litem, I just would like to clarify, I'm the volunteer, not the paid for guardian ad litem, because there's a difference. I don't think it's right to receive money in that position. You're helping the child out of your interest for protecting and being a voice for those children. But let's see, I'm trying to think anything else besides voting, encouraging others to vote, guardian ad litem. I also did small animal rescue and rehab for a number of years. I had about 33 squirrels that I rehabbed and released. And a couple bunnies and raccoons that I took care of and released. But I would say the biggest thing besides small animal rescue and rehab, as a guardian ad litem and as an attorney, I've always been very adamant about giving back to the community. I also do a certain number of pro bono hours each year because I think that's important. I think I answered each part of your question. There were multiple parts there.
Thank you. Paul, I think, is up next, and then Marty, I see.
Can I ask, are we time limiting these answers?
I was wondering that. I think we could 3 minutes would be good.
Okay. Yeah, because Rick came in way under. He should get extra.
Shall I go ahead and ask my question?
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you. This is to Sienna regarding Gabby's law. How does the technology work? Is this a sort of subset of the Amber Alert system to which you referred? Is it a new technology? If it's new technology, what's the cost factor? You indicated that you've done a fair amount of research on this, so you probably researched the cost factor involved. And so how does this differ from Gabby's law? And most importantly, how does this differ, other than the name, from the tools that law enforcement already has?
Okay, so there's a lot of subparts to that question. I'm going to try to address each one in the order that you posed it.
And with the permission of the chair, I'd like to be able to ask a follow-up question after Ms. Osta's response.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Let me at least answer those questions in like the 5 subparts and then throw another subpart at me, but hold on.
Whatever you want to do.
Okay. So essentially, for everyone here this evening, as a recap of what Amber Alerts are, we all get them on our phones. They are alerts that come in when there's a missing child, and it's specific to children ages, up to 18 in the state of Florida. And they're great. They're wonderful. In fact, based on my research, the Amber Alerts have helped locate and save on average 600 children each year since Amber Alerts came into being. Okay, so similar to Amber Alerts, Gabby Alerts, which is part of my Gabby's Law legislation here. And now I've got Amber Alerts, Gabby Alerts, there we go. Gabby Alerts would be sent to everyone's phone in that particular region. And what makes them different is that they are alerts that are unbiased, that would alert everyone, law enforcement and everyday citizens, to missing persons, regardless of race, age, and national origin. And I was shocked when I did the research. We don't have anything like this. Amber alerts are for children, ages, 1 to 18. We've got blue alerts, which are alerts that notify someone, I believe it's if they've assaulted a police officer or law enforcement. We've got silver alerts, which are geared toward the elderly and people with dementia, but there is nothing to cover everybody else in between. And that's, to me, that's a problem, and I want to fix it. So the way Gabby alerts would work, primarily, and I'm still working out the kinks, but primarily they would have that big alert system to send to everybody in the community so that everyone can be on the lookout for who's, matching that description, who's missing, because those first 24 to 48 hours are critical. Then there would also be a social media component. Right now, I'm working with different YouTubers and bloggers from all over the country. We're collaborating right now as we speak. I'm writing the law right now as we speak. So as far as cost, was that time or was it the 30-second warning?
30 seconds.
Okay. There's a lot to unpack in 30 seconds. I can't do all that, but basically I am working with people from all over our great nation who have had family members that went missing and were never found. I'm listening to their experience of how their brother, how their cousin, how their sister, who are all, they're all minorities. They were not, investigated to the same level as other missing persons who happen to be white. And so Gabby's law and Gabby alerts would ensure that there is equality across the board when it comes to finding and protecting missing persons.
Okay, so this is really an addition, sort of a hook on to the Amber Alert system.
You're muted, Mike.
Is Amber Alert a national system or Florida statewide system?
I always think big, so I would want it to be national, but I'll settle for statewide.
But right now, Amber Alert is statewide.
Yeah.
Okay. And this
And
should
I'm
be sort of
doing it.
using, this should be using the same technology as Amber Alert. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yep. And then, as we saw with the Gabby Petito case, all of these, regular people within the community all over the country wanted to become their own sort of internet sleuths and detectives and try to piece together everything. So with that in mind, there's a need for an app that people can download on their phone, and they can join in on these investigative efforts within their community. So
there's new technology involved. What's the cost?
Well, I've had my hands full developing all of that. So
Well,
cost.
you indicate you did an extensive research. So what's the cost?
Yes, the extensive research, just to clarify though, the extensive research was with the FBI and the NCIC databases to fact check, because when I first heard on the news that 1 in 5 missing persons are like Gabby and the others are minorities and they don't get the same coverage in the media or the same level of police investigation, I thought, that's a bold claim. Let's fact check it. So I went to the databases. I did all the math on it based on, and I had to sort it all out. I'm looking at my notes here of basically all the different races that they have listed with the FBI, male versus female, age brackets, and I found that there's a disproportionate percentage, specifically missing people of color with active cases, only 45.65%. Missing persons that are white with active cases, 54.35%. So there is a larger percentage there. I don't want to go too far into those numbers, but the cost factor would be the most effective and frugal cost possible.
To your
Hey,
advantage,
I think that's
to your
enough on
advantage,
this.
there may be very little cost.
I don't know, Rick, if you have anything to
Yes,
add
there may
to
be
that.
very
It was,
little
the
cost.
question was addressed to
That's okay.
Sienna.
I just have, this is what I would say to that. I think you have a great idea. And I would encourage you to speak to the men and women of law enforcement, because what I would tell you from the perspective of someone who has walked a mile in those shoes, I can tell you that missing people, whether you're a pretty white girl or whether you are an Asian boy or whatever you might be, a missing person is just as important to law enforcement. We don't care what you look like. And the ends to which we will go to find you aren't defined by how you look and your visibility on the milk carton. I would agree with you. Minorities are underrepresented on the milk cartons. You rarely see us there, but that doesn't undermine the amount of work that law enforcement does day in and day out to try to find missing people. And if you check with them, I think if you check their websites and their Facebook pages and their Instagrams, filled with, hey, we're trying to find these people. And so I'm not discouraging you because I think it's a great idea, but I encourage you to, and also I say it in order to, I feel almost like I'm defending law enforcement and what they do day in and day out. So with that, I see a question on the board that I'd like to, someone has put into the chat. I think that's the next person's question. I see it there. May I just go ahead and take that?
Well, I would,
Is that Marty Keynes?
Yes.
I would just ask a very brief rebuttal to that before switching subjects.
Right.
Okay, thank you. So I want to make it very clear, very apparent that it's not a knock on law enforcement in any way. I understand that law enforcement objectively tries to do their best with each investigation and handle them equally. However, in speaking to these bloggers all over the country, the issue that I'm hearing repeatedly is that their family members were not given the same level of investigation because of their race, because of their color. And the assumption was, well, maybe based on this person, the way they look, they probably are out with their friends doing these activities. I could go on and on with examples, but they were given, how should I say, blockades. They were given excuses as to why the police were not really digging into their family members' missing person case, and these people that I'm talking with all over the state and all over the country have come to this consensus that their family members did not get the same attention that white people get in these missing person cases, because there's an assumption on perhaps law enforcement's side that based on how this person looks, they're probably out doing this other activity. So we're not really going to look, we're going to wait till they come back. And those critical 24 to 48 hours make a huge difference. And there should be no presumption that somebody's out with friends or out doing some other activity based on what they look like. There needs to be equal notifications, equal coverage, and equal zealous search efforts for all of these people who have gone missing, regardless of race, age, or national origin. So I don't mean it in any way as a knock on law enforcement, but I think I'll simplify it to this: police officers enforce policies. The policies that we have in place are inadequate. And so the policies need to be amended, and there need to be new policies to adapt to the ever evolving world that we currently live in, because many of the policies are outdated.
Okay,
If I may,
Rick,
police officers enforce laws. They follow
Marty?
policies.
Sorry.
So police officers enforce laws, they follow policies. And if I just say one last thing, and this is whatever, I started police work in 1989. When I got there, there was a woman there by the name of Bobby Conklin. Bobby Conklin was a volunteer. She volunteered since before I got there, and Bobby Conklin was there after I left for no money. Her job was missing persons. And nobody in that building ever worked harder than Bobby Conklin. She didn't care what you look like. She didn't care what they said you were doing. Her job was to find you, and she did it as a volunteer. So I take some umbrage with the insinuation that police officers aren't doing their job because of the way you look. But I'm also in that same vein. I'm not saying that police officers are 100% right. Sometimes you can't have not. If you were alive in the last year or so, then you recognize that there are some police officers that need some retraining or don't need to be police officers. But by and large, the men and women of law enforcement, they do their job. Now,
Okay. Now, wait, before you address Marty's question in the chat, and I am going to have some comments about it afterwards, I think, as well. Marty has his hand up. So, well, if you would like, Marty, Do you want to say anything more than that, or just read your question and let Rick and Sienna respond? You have to unmute
And again, is this 3 minutes now?
for the question. No,
Yeah, I mean, no,
Oh,
the
no, for the
answer.
response. Yeah.
My question for everyone to hear and for both candidates, I'm asking this because Omari Hardy created a little news lately when he flip-flopped on this issue. The question for each of you is, what's your stand on the BDS movement towards Israel?
So BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. First of all, let me start by saying there should be, and in my mind, there should be no greater reliance in the world than that of the African-American people and the Jewish people.
Yes.
We are the only two groups of people who have a history of bondage and slavery. And when I talk to the gentleman with whom I share a law space here, Richard Lubin goes back and tells me stories of his time on the front lines of the civil rights movement. My civil rights law professor showed me photographs of he and civil rights leaders of our era conducting marches and speeches. And so when we talk about an individualized treatment of the Jewish people, you don't have me. I don't buy into that. So no, I disagree with Omari. Now, I'm not here to tell you that, there's some things that we need to do in the Middle East, in Israel, but it doesn't include the BDS. It doesn't include that. I think there's a way to settle that, and that's not a part of it.
Sienna?
Yes, so I would sort of resonate with that same position. I don't think that any kind of boycott with Israel is appropriate. I personally have family that is half Jewish, and so I've been over to the Middle East a number of times, both to Israel and also in Lebanon. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm American Lebanese. I would like to make just a minor correction that there is slavery in the Middle East, and I have very unfortunately seen it in present day. Nobody ever wants to talk about it, but it's still happening. And I have seen people in Lebanon shot and killed right in front of me. ISIS is real, and I have seen them, and there's nothing that just one person can do. So besides those traumatizing experiences, no, I would not want to do any, I would not want to suggest or promote anything that would have a negative impact on Israel or Lebanon.
Okay, and I have a couple of follow-up comments on that because I have written about this, and it terrifies me what Republicans are going to try to do in the next year, and I don't want to see us helping them. There is not only no greater understanding of the history of bondage and murder than is shared by the African American and Jewish populations. There are no greater supporters of the Democratic Party. They are our two most loyal constituencies, and Republicans are trying to break us apart. When Rick was talking about the civil rights movement, we have an issue, I think it was last August or June, with a picture of Dr. King and Rabbi Abraham Herschel walking side by side in the South. The Republicans are desperate, and they did it. they did it. We might have had Andrew Gillum as governor, but for the fact that his running mate 30 years earlier had made some comments in a Harvard newspaper when he was a student there. And they ran with that. And there were people in my community who did not vote for Andrew Gillum because his running mate was an anti-Semite in their view. And in the view of many African Americans, there are many Jewish people who are racist. And we have to stop this nonsense. We're going to get Ron DeSantis and Marco Rubio back again next year if we don't come together. So with that, closing statements. I think, Rick, you began. So Sienna, if you want to give your closing statement now. And I said before it was 3 minutes, but I looked at my notes and it was actually 2 minutes that we planned. If that's okay with both of you, let's go with the 2 minutes.
Okay, yes, I'll try to keep it to the 2. All right, well, I just wanted to again thank everyone for allowing me to be here this evening. I am running for state rep for District 88, which, as you know, is part of Palm Beach County here. I'm running against a very good opponent. Rick King is a wonderful person, but in my core, I believe that I have to run so as to give everyone an opportunity to vote for someone like me, who is shameless, unapologetic, and transparent. I also want to make Gabby's Law and Gabby Alerts into a reality. I believe it will help save so many people. I'm working really hard every day, every night. I'm staying up till about 4 o'clock in the morning. I've got the Snapchats to prove it. I go to sleep at 4, I wake up at 7. For the past 60 days, I've been rolling on about 3 hours of sleep a night. That is only to show how incredibly dedicated I am to this cause. And it's very important to get this legislation through. And I really hope that I have your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick?
All right, so thank you, Sienna. It was very nice. I am. First of all, I feel the need to tell you all that I'm running for this position not because I need it. I have a job. I have a successful solo law practice. I don't need the money, and I most certainly don't need a title. And I'll tell you all honestly, I go to bed every night at 9:30 because I'm old and I go to sleep. But I'm gonna run as the authentic Rick King. You know, what you see is what you get. I'm going to give you what I'm telling you I'm going to give you. I'm not running for this for any reason other than right now, I really think I can do something. I need this like I need a hole in the head, but I think that I can do something. And I've been put in a position where my specific skill set can make a difference. I have the experience of leadership. I've ran a platoon of police officers. I was the lieutenant in charge of criminal investigations for the city of West Palm Beach, besides the sheriff's office, they're the largest city in the county. I mean, I've done that. I have a history of leadership. I have experience in my background. I can reach across the aisle when we're supposed to, and I can make a difference when it comes to criminal justice reform, which we definitely need. More important, I really take the people that I meet and the journey like to my heart. For me, like running this campaign is what it's done for me is it's helped me to restore relationships that I didn't know were broken. I've created new relationships where I never thought that I would. I genuinely love getting out and meeting the people and finding out what's in their hearts and what problems they have and how I can fix them. I did it for 20 years. I came to people when they had a problem and I helped them fix it. For the last 11 years, people come to me when they have a problem and I try to help them fix it. That's what I do. I try to build consensus. I try to bring people to the table so we can make a change and make a difference that impacts everyone. I'm running for the State House District 88, and I hope I can count on all your votes.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Sienna. And thank everybody for attending. We had a nice turnout. The election, as most of you know, is not going to be until next year because Ron DeSantis and the Republicans are very happy to have the Democrats one seat down for as long as they can. Our next meeting is we're the second Thursday in every month. So I think it's November 11th. And we hope to have Mindy Koch as our guest speaker. As you probably know, she was just elected vice chair of the Palm Beach County Democratic Party. So if no one has anything more, let me thank everybody again, and say good night, and look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you.
Thanks.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.